Good afternoon. As you're joining us, we will kick things off in just a second. Welcome. As you're joining us, we will start our webinar in just a moment. All right, good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, AI and Public Procurement, a CPO-CIO partnership. Thank you for spending some time with us today. On behalf of NASPO and NASCIO, we're glad you're here. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to explain the format of today's webinar. First, all attendees are muted. You can enter comments and questions in the chat box. If you would like to ask our presenter a question, you can type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your window. Questions will be addressed during the Q&A session after the presentation. At the close of today's webinar, you will be asked to complete a brief survey. Your feedback is very valuable to us here at NASPO. Today's presentation is good for 1 contact hour. To get your certificate, simply complete the questionnaire following the presentation. The idea of this webinar developed from NASPO and NASCIO's collaboration on the AI-powered procurement report that we published in October. We'll drop the report into the chat for your reference. On that note, I'll let Amy Glasscock, NASCIO's Program Director, Innovation and Emerging Issues, kick us off and introduce our speakers. Welcome, Amy.
Thanks so much, Meg. Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Glasscock with NASCIO, as she said. And today we're really excited to have a group of people from 2 separate states sharing their information about the relationship that they have between the CIO's office and the Chief Procurement Office. So first of all, from California, we are joined by Jared Johnson, Deputy State CIO and Chief Deputy Director, as well as Angela Schell, Chief Procurement Officer. And then on the Tennessee side, we have State CIO Stephanie Dudman. We also have Roger Waynick, who is Director of AI Strategy and Innovation in Stephanie's office. And then on the procurement side, we have Nick Edwards and Leighton Beecham in the procurement office. So welcome to everyone. And I believe we said that California would start with their discussion first, although let me know if I'm wrong, y'all.
No, good afternoon. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Jared Johnson. I am the Chief Deputy State CIO for California. I'm joined by Angela Schell, our State Chief Procurement Officer. Just want to give a little bit of background on what California has been doing since September of 2023, when our Governor Gavin Newsom directed specific California state entities to study the development, uses, and risks of generative artificial intelligence technology throughout the state. And so from day one with the executive order, it really requires the chief information officer technologists and our procurement officials to work together in a collaborative approach, because knowing the way that this technology can impact so many things, and some of the projections we've heard about where it may exist in 80% of products available in the near future, it really has reinforced the fact that procurement and the technologists have to work closely to understand the impacts, how to make sure that our policies and our terms and conditions and things like that are very organized and in sync with each other to make sure we're making the smartest decisions for the state. So we started out looking at a safe, secure, and equitable approach. In November of 2023, California published our Benefits and Risks of Generative AI report. And really, that's where we sort of established our approach is going to be around certain uses of the technology, including language access, supporting the state workforce, and ensuring that any of the equity outcomes from the technology, we are working with communities throughout California, especially vulnerable communities, to assess the impacts of this technology. As we've done these reports and the different guidelines we've released, we made sure that we were working with academia within California, so our college system, other organizations, think tanks, et cetera, that have been very helpful. Also working with our vendor community in California, we have significant number of the organizations and vendors who are producing and working with this technology are in California. And it's been very helpful to be able to work closely with them to evaluate the technology and the potential benefits and risks of it. So that's really been where those collaboration steps started from a statewide perspective. One of our first deliverables that Angela really, I think, took one of the most important leads on was rolling out initially our procurement guidelines. And from that procurement guideline, we've established a regular practice of consulting with state departments that are seeking to procure artificial intelligence and generative AI. And throughout the process, working with vendors to share with us how they are using or including the technology in their products, and then working with our state departments to understand how they are planning to use that. And from those two different angles and the collaboration with our procurement officials, as we're going through these conversations, it's allowing us to understand how the state can use the technology, how vendors are introducing it into the marketplace, and from California's perspective, how we can continue to manage and ensure that those principles of safe, secure, and equitable use are maintained. So with that, if I might just turn it over a little bit to Angela, and she
Thanks,
can talk
Jared.
about some of our procurement guidelines and approaches we took.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Jared. And you said it well. Great summary of all of the things that we've been working on and are still working on with our generative AI project pursuant to the executive order. And just a couple of things to kind of reinforce what Jared said. With looking at supporting the state workforce, California has really focused on making sure that our workforce has the opportunity to be trained on what generative AI is, what are the things we should be looking at. From a procurement perspective, when we put our first round of our guidelines out, we also developed a procurement training. It was a short training, but it was enough that we were able to get guidance out to our departments to say, hey, these are the things that you should be aware of when you start to see procurements coming in around generative AI. And a big piece of that was the collaboration between the department procurement official and the CIO of all of our departments that may be going down this path of procuring generative AI solutions or seeing generative AI pop up in procurements. And so we've really done a lot of work around making sure that there is that line of communication with program staff, both at the CIO and the information technology level, but also the programs that are actually needing, whatever this purchase is. And I think that's, it's not something new, but I think it's something that we've really tried to focus on because the generative AI solutions are so new and there's a lot of unknowns. And so before we have somebody go down the path of, making a procurement, awarding a contract, we wanted to make sure that the CIO is on board, that those conversations are being had about what's being purchased, what the vendor has advised they're going to provide to the state. And then that further collaboration with the CIO, going outside to Jared's department and really having conversations with the Department of Technology, all again, so that we can learn about what is it that we're trying to buy here, what are the program impacts, what are the stakeholder impacts, all of those things. And so it's been a really good collaboration path that we established, right out of the gate with the executive order. And the other pieces, just to touch on, are really around, we'll talk a little bit more later on our RFI squared, but also around the testing piece with our state workforce, making sure that our state workforce has the ability that might ultimately be the users of the generative AI. So it's one thing to test the system to see if it meets requirements, but to have the users actually be involved in how the system works and whether it, can help increase efficiency in the services that we're providing to Californians. And so I think with that, we can probably move on to the next slide unless there's anything else you want to add, Jared.
I think I would just add protecting state data from day one has been very important, preserving California residents' trust in government and what we're doing. So we've been very transparent in terms of our approach. And one of the things when it comes to protecting state data, my organization, the California Department of Technology, we're responsible for some of the policies and things about protecting the data, the architecture of compute environments, things of that nature. Whereas Angela's team from the procurement perspective has been very complementary in ensuring that our terms and conditions and special provisions and things like that really reinforce some of those principles. So it's just one of those things where, making sure, as you've all probably heard with this technology, the quality of your data really drives the quality of how the technology can perform. And so we've really made that our upfront emphasis from a security perspective and a data governance, but also from a procurement perspective.
Yeah.
Angela, do you want to kick off with our little overview of the RFI squared?
Yeah, happy to. So we have an innovative procurement method in the state of California that started before our generative AI solutions, came to market. But we call it the Request for Innovative Ideas 2. We have that 2 in there. But it's really an opportunity for us to kind of flip procurement on its end and ask the industry or innovators, what solutions? We have a problem in the state of California that we are not sure how we might fix it through the procurement process. So we don't know what our specific requirements are. We don't know if there's software out there. We don't know what we can buy to fix this. And so we've kind of flipped procurement on its end, and we put a problem statement out on the street, and we ask industries to come back and give us your solution. Give us an innovative idea as a concept, and then we take that concept and we test them. In this case, we did it in a sandbox environment, and I know Jared will talk a little bit more about that. But essentially, it's kind of, like I said, flipping procurement on its end and saying, here's our problem. You tell us, industry, how you might solve it. And this procurement method uses negotiation as part of our sort of tool to be able to test these concepts that are submitted to us. And so we decided to check this out with our generative AI solutions, and we formulated some problem statements. And the way the process works is we put those out on the street. We get concept papers back. We do score those concept papers. For those of you that are in the procurement world, we do score those. We advertise it out on the street. We get those concept papers in. We score those concept papers. And it's really a loose scoring of, what does your concept do? Does it attempt to solve our problem statement? And then we choose a number of innovators and we test whatever their solution is in a test environment. And there is a contract that's issued. We go through a testing phase and then we evaluate that and we decide, do we want to then do a full scale up solution, which is a secondary contract, with any of the innovators that we've tested, either in a sandbox or that we've tested their solution. We put those that come through the process sort of in a pool. We have an innovator pool that we keep open until we've made it through a testing environment and we've made a decision. And that gives us the opportunity to go back to the pool. So if we test 1 to 2 vendors and we say their solution doesn't really meet our needs, we can go back to that innovator pool and keep pulling people out of it to continue testing. And so that's what we chose to do with our generative AI test cases, if you will. And so we put 5 problem statements out on the street back at the end of last year, actually. We put those out on the street and we got responses back. We had quite a pool of responses, and that pool actually remains open today. We chose 2 innovators from each of our problem statements, and we've been testing their solutions in a sandbox environment since probably around the February-March timeframe. We are coming to the end of that testing phase so that we can see how their concepts might meet our needs. And the problem statements really provide a background about the program. They talk about what the problem is. They talk about whether there's any sort of loose needs that might be associated with that, like, hey, we have to meet this requirement or we have to meet that requirement, but it's not a, from a technical perspective, you need to give us XYZ solution. So we've been working on that, and I guess I've talked about it before, in a lot of different realms, but our RFI Squared projects were really in the area of our Department of Transportation had a couple that are related to protecting vulnerable roadway users, so being able to gather data and have a generative AI solution assess that data and help our state determine, where we might make future improvements. We also had one around traffic mobility, and that is looking at just high level like bottlenecks in the system and where can we redirect traffic using generative AI to be able to move traffic in a different area because there's bottlenecks coming up. We also had 3 more. So those were the 2 transportation ones. We have one in our Department of Tax and Fee Administration around call center assistance, helping our call center technicians be able to get data to them faster to be able to help respond and sort of reduce the call length, the call duration. We have one around language access. This is with our Health and Human Services Agency, and this is around making sure that our Californians with limited English proficiency can access state information. And then the last one is around healthcare facility inspections, where we have our public health that goes out, does inspections. They want to be able to capture the inspection information and use generative AI to help them come up with a resolution that is based off of state and federal requirements. So those were the RFI Squareds. I went over that pretty quickly. I can tell you just sort of that last little bullet there that this it has required in California, a lot of collaboration. DGS, my department, did the procurements, but we had to work with each and every one of the programs within the departments that need the generative AI. And then, of course, Jared's department, the Department of Technology, who is managing the sandbox and who has been with us lockstep in evaluating requirements and helping the vendors get through the sandbox and helping us get through contract requirements, all of those things. So, Jared, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit about the sandbox environment.
Yeah, thank you. Angela, that was very helpful. The sandbox environment is really just a safe and secure computing environment that we've established within the state's infrastructure to test out these innovative ideas that Angela spoke to. So when you think about that process, the RFI Squared, we're providing a space for innovators to go through what we like to call a bake-off, but essentially to demonstrate what they can do to solve the problem that we have put out there through the procurement. And it's been very successful. With our third bullet, just again, focusing on how we're collaborating, as Angela said, there's definitely clear-cut procurement terms, conditions, things like that that are needed. There's also the technical requirements from the sandbox and the solutions that we're testing. But really, the RFI Squared is not necessarily the most common procurement method. And so one of the things that we've done intentionally with these proofs of concept is work at the beginning with the state entities that are participating. California has the Office of Data and Innovation, and they've been very helpful in helping these departments approach these proofs of concepts through some readiness workshops and thinking about, measuring the value and evaluating the solutions from a user experience perspective and from a business value perspective. And so that's really been a shift for our departments. And this required Angela's Department of General Services and the California Department of Technology and all of us to come together and really working with the vendors and the departments to step through this process. And largely it's been successful. Having such fluid and regular conversation with all parties involved has allowed the workforce to understand how these solutions can solve problems with efficiencies and things like that, but also how our organizations are kind of normalizing this new collaborative approach going forward, especially when it becomes a challenge-based or a problem-based type of procurement. I'll just jump ahead and talk a little bit about what's to come. We're coming up on one of our last deliverables with the executive order I mentioned. And with our project delivery lifecycle, it really is setting up a way for departments to leverage the procurement approach, the RFI squared, so that while we're planning projects, we're also kicking off procurement and leveraging sandboxes for proofs of concepts. And that's really kind of happening at the same time. And so it's taking what we did with the early generative AI POCs and establishing it as a normal business practice to the extent possible within California. So that project delivery lifecycle will kick off. Departments will sort of go through some of these workshops that we've established. They'll learn how to approach things from a product mindset and with that user experience in mind. And then as we iterate through the procurement, technologists, procurement officials, departments and vendors will be working closely together to really tailor make these solutions to meet California's needs. And we're going to do it in an iterative way. So rather than do a 3 to 5 year long haul project and try to invest millions in that, we're going to try to break it up into chunks that are a bit more manageable iterations where we're getting early value through the POC and minimum viable product and things like that. So we're really excited for that to be revealed in January of 2025. And in addition to that, Angela, there's some additional terms and conditions and things like that that I think your team has been working on.
Yeah, so I'll just touch briefly on those. So we have issued generative AI contract terms and conditions. In California, we are required to get feedback from our industry. So we have to publicly post our IT. It's just for our IT terms and conditions. So we're in that phase right now where we've put draft terms and conditions out there just for the generative AI piece. And we've incorporated things like definitions around what is Gen AI training data, what is Gen AI, what are hallucinations. We've got disclosure obligations, which is already a part of our procurement process, but we had not put it into our standard terms and conditions yet. And so this is an attempt to make it more of a standard rather than in having it be solicitation language. And so our vendors are required to disclose if they're using generative AI in any procurement, any type of procurement, not just IT. And then we also have some contractor obligations for the responsible use of generative AI. And this touches on the pieces around equity, decision-making. So those are the pieces that we have out. And then also sort of the right to state data, contractor use of state data. So those are the pieces that we have out on the street right now that we're collecting information on, and they will go into this package that Jared mentioned about the end of January, where we will have these terms approved, they'll be reviewed, approved, and we'll have them posted, and they will be incorporated into any contract that has a generative AI piece.
Thank you, Angela. I want to be respectful of our colleagues in Tennessee and the information they want to share. There are a couple of questions. Dustin Hartigan, maybe, hopefully I pronounced that correctly. When I talk about the state infrastructure, for the purposes of the proofs of concept, these were lightweight environments just to establish the technology. We did not necessarily use any GPU or anything of that nature. We use state-managed cloud service provider environments, and really just focused on the compute and storage aspects of it. We are still evaluating going forward whether we would have on-prem or hosted types of solutions. It really is just going to depend on the needs of the state and how much adoption comes with these solutions. So we're still sort of evaluating that piece of it, but for the POCs, it was done in a cloud service provider environment. Okay, let me, with that, Angela, if you have any other thoughts, or we can turn it over to Tennessee, I think, and give them an opportunity to share their approach.
Yeah, let's do that. Thank you, Jared.
Okay, thank you all. I appreciate the time.
All right. And I am keeping note of who asked what questions when who was speaking so that we can circle back around to them when we have time at the end. So it's not too confusing between the two states. So yeah, let's go ahead and turn it over to Tennessee.
Thank you, Amy, and thanks to NASCIO and NASPO for having us join California today. I'm Stephanie Dedman. I'm the Chief Information Officer for the state of Tennessee. We've got folks, or Roger from my team and our partners in our central procurement office. We sit in two different agencies, but both shared services organization. And I just want to start to talk about our collaboration and partnership. We have worked on our relationship with the CPO's office for years and continue to work on that and make sure we collaborate at every turn, every opportunity. We help each other be better, and we continue to work together to identify creative and possible procurement methods, whether we're talking about AI or other technologies. One of the questions we kicked around when we were preparing for this is AI different from a procurement governance management standpoint? And I would say it's different because it's coming at us so fast. I don't remember a technology that's had such quick take up by users who know nothing about technology and who want to incorporate it into their daily jobs. So it's different because we've had to really, I would say, slow down to speed up and make sure we address the right things. But I'm going to ask Roger to kind of explain a little bit about our AI Advisory Council that was established in legislation. We do not have an executive order, but we do have a statute that requires us to do some things. And then we have some governance that we're managing and with our CPO partners at the table. So Roger, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Stephanie. Yeah, I'll hit on the AI Council real quick. Every state, most states have set up something like this, either by executive order or by legislation, a council, committee, task force. Ours was set up by legislation to do an overall view of how AI is impacting the state of Tennessee, not just in state government, but also the economic conditions of the state, the labor market, and workforce development, education, and then also training for state employees. So that is the efforts that we have going on in Tennessee are kind of twofold. They're split between the AI Council, which the scope is much more broad than just state government, but it still also includes state government. And then we also have an AI working group internally for how it's affecting state operations. The way we set it up was looking at it from like a whole state of Tennessee purpose. So there are folks from the legislative branch, there are folks from the judicial branch, STS being the centralized IT organization for the state. We are leading it, but that does not mean we are making decisions in a vacuum. Everyone has been asked to come to the table and work with us as we've developed policies, governance, anything decision that's being made related to AI. We ask everyone's opinions. We want to do this together because it is coming at us so fast, like Stephanie said. And I think we're all aware of that. We don't want to make it sound like we're telling everyone what they need to do. Work with us and we'll go through it together. And we'll get into this a little bit more when we talk about when CPO jumps in, but how we are choosing AI pilots that we're running, being run by the business, letting them come and say, this could help us here. And if it works in one place, we could use it somewhere else within the state also. So Stephanie, how would you like to proceed now? Do we want to kick it to CPO?
Sure, but before we do that, I was just going to add that, and Roger alluded to it, we are a very centralized state, meaning 20 of the 23 executive branch agency IT teams are part of my team. And so that does mostly makes governance and delivery of AI solutions a little bit easier in that we can mandate coordination and sharing. And so we have 13 or 14 use cases that are in varying levels of design, planning, implementation. But we are encouraging all of our business users and IT professionals to bring their use cases forward so that we can evaluate them in from a safety and applicability, and are they going to deliver the benefits intended? And secondly, are those use cases potentially shareable across multiple agencies? With that, I will turn it over to Nick. Are you up first, or Leighton?
I think it's Leighton.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
I think what I'm going to kind of start us off with is something that Stephanie and Roger mentioned about how, we're CPO and STS at our core. We're both shared service agencies. At our core, our missions are about serving our customers, which are our other state agencies. This kind of has led us down a really natural path of collaboration with each other and with our other agencies, including the AI working group, where we've got a seat at the table. It's helped us have similar goals as well, and to help us identify the best business need for our customers. And so our AI pilots that we identify, that we investigate, are solely driven by the business need, like Roger mentioned. So if we're not just looking into like the new fancy smancy product that's out there because it can just do X, Y, and Z. We want it to help solve a problem that not only can solve a problem for one agency, but it can solve a problem across enterprise wide. And I was mentioning this with some of our NASPO folks earlier, but us being a shared services agencies and collaborating with one another, this has really helped us tear down silos within state government, and that's been really important for us across AI, because Stephanie mentioned earlier about how fast AI is developing, and we've got things getting thrown at us, so quickly. And AI procurement, technology procurements are difficult as is because they do move so rapidly. Now we've got AI that's moving even more quickly. So we have to kind of collaborate together and break down even more silos to collaborate more efficiently. So that way we do have these open communication lines, these common goals, creating new procurement methods if we have to, in order to solve these new business needs that we may be having.
Yeah, I can talk on that third bullet point that we have on this slide about our process improvement initiatives. One of the things that we in CPO worked on, really specific to procurement, was looking at AI's inclusion into just like procurement processes, and that process improvement initiative, we've done that for I think going on 10 years straight, and that looks like something different every year. I mean, that's like cross collaborative teams in CPO, maybe hosting a seminar that might be updating onboarding materials. That's just kind of a continuous improvement thing that we do every year, and the topics change every year. Knowing that AI's inclusion into like our daily work was going to be a really important topic. We made that a topic a couple of years ago, and I think as that team was working through their research efforts, it very naturally included Roger and STS towards the end for us to kind of share what we had found and what we worked on, and pass it along to them so they can kind of see the way that we were looking at it as well. So if you guys want to go to the next slide, I think I might be the first one on the next slide as well. So preparing for this, I think one of the things that we took away from like kind of talking this out was just and I think California said this as well. I had made a note of that when Jared was talking, that the flexibility and the fluidity of like communication doesn't doesn't like uh, doesn't start with just our executive leaders. I think everybody kind of along the chain of command for us are in communication with one another. I know one of my indirect reports worked really closely with Roger on that process improvement initiative. And, Roger and our general counsel work very closely together. It would not be abnormal for Stephanie to be talking to one of my specialists who's, you know, boots on the ground working on a procurement. And I think that maybe informality of trusting each other and going kind of back and forth has really helped us out. Another note that I made that's not necessarily on this slide is that um, a lot of people that are doing IT procurement at STS that we interact with on a day-to-day basis came through CPO at some point. So we also kind of just like speak the same language, and we have personal and professional relationships with them that really help us pick up the phone and just have some transparent conversations and ask, how we can help, what we can do, express concerns. And, I just think of some of the like really key stakeholders over there are people that, I worked really closely with some of my first like years in state government. So some of that to me is like really invaluable this is, I think, is a central theme of kind of what everybody says as this stuff is happening so quickly and so fast and changing so rapidly that you do have connections and relationships at your partner agencies to be able to work together.
I want to add to that, Nick. As the share and like hit home on the shared service aspect of it, like the business need, our customers are all of the agencies that are doing all the work: the Department of Children's Services, Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, Department of Safety and Homeland Security. Everyone out there, we're working to allow them to have a customer service approach. So, someone could come to Nick and to Leighton and say, "We need to do this." They're not gonna think about like give you reasons why it shouldn't happen. We're going to get creative about how to make it happen to make their jobs easier. And that's been my approach with looking at AI pilots and use cases. If this is going to help them do their jobs better, then let's figure out how to make it happen. I just got out of a 3-hour demo session with a vendor to help for a use case around document verification for driver's license examiners. And I think that's something that they need to do their jobs better. And AI can 100% help with that. So we're going to figure out how to break down any barriers for them to do that.
One of the things we had talked about was kind of lessons learned on maybe some use cases that didn't pan out. Leighton, I don't know if you want to describe the use case that we had specifically for your office between you and Roger, and why that didn't come to fruition.
Are you speaking on surmise?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I think, Roger, I think that might be best for you to tackle that one.
Yeah, the majority of the vendor community is coming at us with saying, we've got this fancy new thing. And we apply it to a use case and we do tracking of it. And if just because it is the shiny new thing doesn't mean it's going to necessarily work. And we're fine to say, this didn't fit our need, so let's go another route. Like there are so many products out there. This was around contracting and being able to do red lines and looking at like being able to dig into contracts and finding, the insights in a faster approach. And it just didn't work. So we working together, we said, let's go another route and look at another option out there, because we didn't have to be tied into it. But us, sitting down working through the use case, setting a timeline around it, and saying this isn't right for right now. We'll find something else.
Yeah. And this is why, I mentioned earlier about us, collaborating with each other and if need be, crafting, entirely new procurement methods. We took some inspiration from the state of Michigan and their Cronin submission from, I think it was a couple of years ago when they talked about the competitive proof of concepts. We decided right away that, AI agency use cases was a really good environment for this because we could control these in like a real world situation with a low stakes. So if something like Surmise didn't work out like it did in this case, okay, so what type, we haven't invested that many resources in it, and we can move on to the next thing to try something new.
Before I summarize, Nick, Leighton, Roger, any final comments you want to say about where we are in Tennessee?
Roger, I'm defer to you. You're the AI guy.
Yeah.
I think, having the support of our leadership is extremely important, and our leadership is, puts a lot of faith in us and gives us a lot of room to run, and a lot of that. I think that goes a really long way for us, and breaking down barriers, and understanding that sometimes things don't work out like a small pilot, but we've got 100 other options to go with. So we appreciate that from the head of the department that Leighton and Nick work in, and their chief procurement officer, and from our commissioner of our department and Stephanie's leadership. So just to add that.
I think the only thing I'll touch on, and I've said it a million times already, but just breaking down the silos, we say here we put a bunch of efforts into enterprise-wide collaboration and customer focus. That is key to success here with AI development. If you're not working together, sharing these goals, having these common goals, communicating with each other, and such, it's going to be really difficult to be successful. And that's been, from top down, from the governor's office down in the state of Tennessee, that's been kind of the direction that we've operated under. And so, and I think that's kind of what led us to be successful.
I was just going to tack on one other part of it's also nice to have like colleagues with NASCIO and NASPO sharing what they're doing and what's working and what's not working. And I think so much about that, like Michigan example, that was like a Cronin submission, I think from like 2022, 2023, that to be able to go on to like NASPO's website, watch the video that's posted on there to explain what it is and be able to share it with, people that were our customers that we're working with on a day-to-day basis, as we're kind of talking through some solutions. It's super helpful. I mean, it allows us not to have to like go to the drawing board on every single thing to be able to show what other states are doing and how they're like being successful.
I'll tag on one last thing that you said, that Nick, and it was on our previous slide, but driving our use cases being driven by the business need. We did hold an AI Expo back in September, and talking about our NASCIO and NASPO partners. Like, I'm collaborating constantly with other states, and that whole idea came out of the state of Texas. They literally gave us the blueprint for how to hold an AI Expo, and our partners are extreme. Like, I take a lot of good ideas from out there. That, like, they're Leighton and Nick are talking about what they got from state of Michigan. I think this is a good collaborative group, and I really appreciate it, and it's helped us a lot.
Well, the three of them summarized for me, so I don't think I'll add anything other than just collaboration, governance, and then communication with the agencies to share both successes and lessons learned, because we're all learning about AI, vendor capability, tools, and so it takes a village for sure. Thank you.
All right, well, let's open it up for some questions. I will go back to the chat box, and I know that we have some questions in Q&A as well. So let me start with the webinar chat. Going back to Jared, first of all, let's see. From Katarina Pangalainen, did the RF12 require info, or it might have been RF squared, I believe that's what you called it, require info from vendors regarding training AI, model information, how you tested for bias, ongoing oversight practices?
Thank you. Yeah, that question was also in the Q&A, and so Angela responded. Angela, I don't know if you want to respond, or I can just kind of reiterate the answer. But what I'll say is we looked at the risks specific to the technology, plus our normal approach to securing our computing environments and the different legal terms and conditions around intellectual property for the state and protecting data, et cetera. So we sort of relied upon what was already in place and then built upon that for any of the novel or unique challenges that come with generative AI. As Angela helpfully put in the Q&A, the legal staff from our Department of General Services, California's Department of Technology, and the participating departments collaborated on ensuring that those items were addressed through the contract and the terms and conditions as we developed it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Let's see. And then a question from Doug Robinson. Almost all IT products and services today are embedding Gen AI solutions in their offerings. They aren't discrete Gen AI platforms. How are chief procurement officers addressing this development, and are states requiring this disclosure in the T's and C's?
I can answer from California. So we touched on it a little bit earlier, but part of our procurement guidance is that all vendors have to disclose if they are using generative AI in any procurement, any type of procurement. And so California established a form that we require during any solicitation process. And if our departments, get a form back that says, yes, I'm using generative AI, then currently that invokes that collaboration with that CIO within that department. And the CIO looks at that disclosure from the vendor to say, okay, well, what are you using? The form requires them to say, this is, the model I'm using. This is the type. It gives a little bit of information. And so that triggers it to go back to the CIO, and the CIO evaluates it to see, is this low risk? Is this high risk? Is it moderate? What are we looking at with the use of generative AI? But currently today, it's required for every procurement. The vendor has to disclose if they're using generative AI.
Okay, great. And how about Tennessee?
Yeah, I can add to that. It's not in the contract at this point, but so our internal people will, when they're going through negotiations, they'll ask, or they'll know whether it has Gen AI or any type of AI in it. And when they're going through the procurement process, we call them exceptions, and there is a question that hits on AI, and if it does hit on AI, then that gets pinged with my team. We have a weekly standing AI review committee, again comprised of not just centralized IT folks. It is people from across branch that meets and talks about these things, looks at privacy statements. There are things that we've had to have some pushback and add some language in contracts if they say that they are training on state data. That is not acceptable. We have very specific pass-fail questions that go through this, but any type of IT procurement will go through the same process.
Great, thank you.
Amy, if I could quickly add from
Please.
California's perspective, we do something very similar. We ask intentionally sort of the vendor what they're doing, and then we have what we talked about as that use case risk analysis that the departments perform as well. And so we combine that data, and our enterprise architecture office in California is also looking. And so as we see what we call an incidental purchase, which would be a product that somebody might include an AI feature in, but it's not necessarily the predominant technology, we're looking to establish state standards to streamline the procurement. So right now we're being more intentional and looking at most procurements, but as we establish something that has a low risk quality to it, that'll be more streamlined. And then when we get into that intentional Gen AI, where we're actually looking for the technology, a model or something to solve a problem, that's where we're going to get in and have those deeper conversations with vendors and departments about what they're trying to do, how the state's data is protected, things like that.
Great, thanks. Anybody else that was on a panel have anything to add to that? All right. And just, some of the questions in the question and answer box were answered, but just to reiterate, one of them was, did the state pay the innovators during the POC testing phase? I believe that was to California. And does payment commence only after the award? And Angela said that the state paid the vendors $1 for the testing in the sandbox. This is the first contract, and if there's a scale-up contract, that will incorporate the cost of the solution. So I know always helpful to kind of read those out for the recording purposes. Who else has a question? I'll read another one that was in the chat box. Can you share how you have incorporated your legal counsels into this conversation? Are there concerns about liability with the use of AI that would be best discussed with the attorneys? And Angela responded, the legal staff from DGS, CDT, and the departments have been involved throughout the process with contract review, terms and conditions, development questions, et cetera. The liability question would be a great conversation with the attorneys. So I don't know if Tennessee has anything to add to that topic.
I have something to add.
Sure.
Do you know what I was going to say, Leighton?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page.
Our head attorney, Paul, I looked to see if he was in here. I don't think he is, but I think some of his staff are on. Paul's like really passionate about AI and technology, and that makes all this so much easier to take like things that we haven't done before to our legal counsel, because this is like, I mean, he's like reading about this in his free time. Like he's really excited about where this is going and what this means for state government. So that's been a big, I think maybe some places that could be seen as like an obstacle and like a roadblock. I think for us, having like the right person in that place for as far as CPO's head attorney has really like helped us push this stuff along. Is that what you're gonna say, Leighton? Yeah. Okay.
All right, we have another question. I'm not sure who this is directed to. Solomon, you might want to clarify, but maybe it's clear when I ask it. Can you give an example on how contractors use Gen AI?
Oh, sorry, Roger, please.
When you say contractors, is that in the chat somewhere?
It's in the Q&A box.
The Q&A box.
Just like examples. Do you think that's what they're looking for?
Yeah.
I can take one. I saw something really cool that somebody was using a Gen AI tool for we have a contract with our Department of Health where when a patient comes in, they like say their symptoms, and they would enter it into this tool, and it was scouring like a ton of academic journals, and then it was giving them like a synopsis on several different types of like symptoms, and giving them kind of like a write-up to go off of, or things to like consider as they consulted the patient. I don't think that we had like considered that like AI part of that as part of our solicitation. Like we didn't ask for that, but I thought that was like a really interesting like approach for them to work that into their proposal to make their product and their overall submission for us like a lot more interesting, and potentially score higher than I guess whatever the other proposers had.
I have another one that I can throw out there that I've seen recently. There's an office furniture vendor that you can provide different layouts, different dimensions of a floor plan, tell it what type of cubicles and whatnot that you would like, and it can then print you out, numerous different types of floor plans and different types of budgets and such for, your office furniture or your real estate teams to then present to, the architect teams or whatnot on who's developing and putting together the furniture plans for your offices. There's also, the LexisNexuses of the world and such are having generative AI tools thrown inside their offerings as well. We're seeing those, and I think I saw on one of the attendees, one of our attorneys who's actually working on some of the AI tools that LexisNexus and such is offering on some of our contracts right now. That we're working through.
Yeah, if I can just add a slightly different take on that, I think through our challenge-based procurements, we've seen a variety of creative ways that the community is using the technology. But going back to kind of how Angela and I are working together, one of the things that we are watching is vendors who are doing business with the state of California and potentially choosing to use generative AI on the back end for code generation or things like that. And so really thinking about, again, from that legal perspective about how to protect the state's interests and ensuring that things that we would consider proprietary aren't, without our knowledge, direct knowledge, being used in some sort of a public model or generated. So that's slightly different take on the response, but that's one of the things that we suspect that contractors are going to be doing more prevalent, and we're going to be monitoring that to ensure our terms and conditions still continue to protect the state's interest in those types of situations.
Great. Well, it is 5 till the next hour, and I want to give everybody a chance to transition to your next meeting. So I'm going to hand it back over to Meg from NASPO to close us out.
Perfect. Thank you, Amy. I appreciate that. And I appreciate all the questions in the chat. That was wonderful. And with that, we will conclude today's presentation. I want to thank all of our presenters today for the valuable information they shared and for working with us here at NASPO and NASCIO to bring it to you. As a reminder, attendees, you will receive a follow-up email containing today's slides and materials. Remember, this webinar qualifies as 1 contact hour for your continuing education credits. To receive your certificate, simply fill out the survey in your browser window once you've exited the webinar. Questions entered into the chat and Q&A boxes have been saved, and if you have any additional ones, we will try and follow up via email. Thanks again to our wonderful presenters, and thanks to our guests. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.